How's it going? I'm Marlena. Thanks for wandering by. Oh, and this is my pup, Hilo, whose little puppy face is making a cameo in this video. He sometimes is here, sometimes not. Anyway, welcome to, welcome back to Decan Walk 2023. For those of you that don't know what Decan Walk 2023 is, I'm going to leave links sometimes in the cards, but everything in the description box below of my very first video introducing the Decan Walk and the playlist with my videos and a lot of other folks who have joined in this Decan Walk. Basically, a Decan Walk is where we are taking a look at each astrological sign as we pass through it throughout the year. Each zodiac sign is broken into 3 different decans, which are either about 10 days or 10 degrees, all in Western astrology. And each of those decans has a corresponding tarot card in the minors from 2 to 10 that's been assigned by the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. So basically, we're just taking a look at the astrological components that are kind of baked inside the tarot according to the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. All right, so without further ado, we're going to talk about the new decan that we're just entering right now, which is Gemini 2. And Gemini 2 is a doozy. Gemini, all the Gemini decans are kind of doozies because they are the swords cards. So we just came out of Gemini 1, which is the 8 of swords, and now we're in Gemini 2, which is the 9 of swords, and Gemini 3 will be, spoiler alert, the 10 of swords. So these are really iconic cards, and they're really I feel like they don't need a whole lot of explanation, but I want to show you the cards, and I want to talk, we'll talk about the Waite Smith, we'll talk about the Thoth, and then I'll lead you through where I landed in terms of creating a spread for myself and for all of us on how to deal, how to cope. So we'll get there. So let's first start with taking a look at the Decan card itself. And so this is from the Divine Decan Tarot, which was kindly sent to me by Reese Marin. Hi, Reese. I know she's watching. Anyway, thanks for that. It's been a super handy deck for this whole Decan Walk, and I really, really appreciate it. Okay, so Mars in Gemini. So let's take a look. It's the 9 of Swords. Mars in Gemini is let me see, I just want to make sure I show you the dates. June 1st through June 10th. And I know that the dates can vary year to year by a day or two. I'm just going with what's on this card and what's on my Decan wheel that I've been using. So we have Mars in Gemini, mutable air, and I explained mutable air last time when we entered Gemini season. Gemini is the end of the spring season. So it's mutable because it's like a transition period from spring into summer. So any of the signs that are considered mutable happen at the end of their season, and it is because they're transitioning into the next season. Okay, and so we have 9 of Swords, despair, and cruelty. I'm not sure, I'll look in Tarot Deciphered because we're gonna get into that, the book by Susan Chang and M.M. Moline, to look at the title of the card. Cruelty, or Lord of Cruelty, I think is the title that Crowley gives the card in the Thoth deck, and despair might be the Hermetic title, but we'll look. in just a second. So here's the iconic image for the Nine of Swords that everyone who's even been looking at tarot for a minute is familiar with. Yeah, I mean, it conjures the idea of fear, anxiety, nightmares. I've heard this card called the Nightmare card many times, with the Nine Swords, the black background, and the person holding their head in their hands in their bed. So it definitely is one of the cards that when you get it, it's sort of like, whoa, it's one of those that you don't want to get or love to get. So the every single of our Decan cards has two majors that are associated with it based on the astrology. So Mars in Gemini means that our Mars, the major card that's associated with Mars is the Tower. I mean, and we've seen this before. We saw Mars in Aries with our very first Decan card when we started. So the Tower is the tarot card that's associated with Mars. And then we have our Lovers card, which we saw last time, because the Lovers is the Gemini card. So these are the images from the Waite Smith. We have our Tower. You can see how the black background is here in the Nine of Swords. And then we also have the Lovers. Let's take a look at these cards in the Thoth deck, and then I want to, read to you from my different sources and kind of lead you where I went in terms of the Nine of Swords, which is a tough card. So this is the Nine of Swords in the Thoth Tarot. It has your title, Cruelty. And they're 9 swords dripping with blood and poison. Also, very much in alignment here, these two cards, with just visually and energetically. They don't, it doesn't feel like they veer far in meaning, as some of the cards do here with Waite Smith and Thoth. Okay, so then we have the Nine of Swords, and then the Tower is Mars, which is an extremely intense card. It's intense in the Waite Smith, but it is extremely intense for me always in the Thoth, with the mouth of fire and all of this like sacred geometry and red. It's just so red, this whole card. And then our Lovers card over here, which is our Gemini card. So these are our cards from the Thoth Tarot. Now I want to read to you from Tarot Deciphered. And I'm just gonna keep it kind of brief today and read just from a couple of books. I did read through several different of my sources, but these are the ones that really kind of summarized the astrology, the Mars and Gemini piece very well for me, in a way that I felt I wanted to share with you. That was the way that I understood it best. So this is from Tarot Deciphered. And oh, real quick, while I'm in this book, let me look up the Hermetic title. So the Lord of Cruelty, and then it has a parentheses, despair and cruelty. So the Nine of Swords is the Lord of despair, and cruelty. Despair and cruelty, it feels like this image, sorry, I've got to do it. This image feels like despair And this image feels like cruelty, if there's ever like a tiny, like a fraction of a difference between these two. And Susan Chang makes a distinction as well about this seeming more like like the despair seems more self-inflicted pain, whereas cruelty feels like it's more pain inflicted upon others. But I think largely, in my opinion, that the Nine of Swords is self-inflicted pain, or self-inflicted cruelty and pain. That's how I always read it. So I'm going to read you this little excerpt from Tarot Deciphered. This is Tarot Deciphered. Gemini 2, I'll just hold this guy up. Gemini 2 uncomfortably combines Mercury, ruler of Gemini, with Mars, ruler of the Decan, and the Moon, ruler of Nines. Okay, so I don't need to hold up the tarot cards here, but we know that, see, the Decan has a ruler, right, which is Mars. And then Gemini has a ruler, which is Mercury. And then because it's a 9, we're talking about, or at least M.M. Moline and Susan Chang here in this book are talking about the Tree of Life. So on the Tree of Life, the 9s are situated in Yesod, which is ruled by the moon. So that's what this is referring to. So they're not just taking into account Mars in Gemini, but Mars, Mercury, and the moon. All right, so Gemini Mercury relates to the mind, as does the sharp suit of swords. The mind, with all its chaotic propensity, becomes a dangerous place when pitiless Mars unleashes his fury. Pitiless Mars unleashes his fury in the realm of the moon, the subconscious, and the astral. Gemini is gifted with speech and idea, but Mars is barbarous and the moon is unstable. Merciless thoughts and words, whether directed at the self or outward, can cause pain. Whether directed at the self or outward can cause pain. So because we have like a martial force of Mars, which is, you know, the Tower, which is so, what's the word that she uses? Pitiless. Pitiless Mars unleashes their, you know, their power. When Mars enters Gemini, which is ruled by Mercury, it is, and all of this is happening here in the mind. Also because it's a 9 in this astral plane, right? The moon, the subconscious, the unconscious, or whatever. It is just creating a space of like havoc, you know, wreaking havoc on the mind and causing pain and despair and cruelty. So that's what Emma Moline and Susan Chang had to say in Tarot Deciphered. This book, The Tarot Handbook by Angeles Arian, is one of my favorites. And she talks about, you know, the Thoth. But I really think it applies across the board. So when she talks about the astrology and the Nine of Swords, she says, the astrological aspect on this card is Mars in Gemini. Mars is a planet of energy, vitality, and assertion. So whereas, you know, in Tarot Deciphered, they were talking about Mars as like barbaric and pitiless and, you know, that kind of thing. I mean, there's always two sides to every coin, right? But like, yeah, it's very energetic, full of vitality, full of assertion. And that can be, you know, have a positive or negative spin to it. So Mars is the planet of energy, vitality, and assertion. So this is self-criticalness that has vitality and assertiveness to it. That's cool, huh? Gemini indicate, well, cool, like interesting. Gemini indicates a tendency of reworking things, right? The twins, Gemini, you know, communication, Mercury, that kind of thing. Gemini indicates a tendency of reworking things, going back and forth. Well, and we saw that in the Eight of Swords, right? Going back and forth, particularly self-critical things. Mars is dynamic energy and power, and mental degradation. Rewind. Mars is dynamic energy and power of mental degradation that is felt both dynamically and magnetically within the nature of the personality, which is Gemini. Oh my God, that's a hard sentence to read. Anyway, I don't want to get like too mired down in like esoteric stuff with this one, because I feel like it's just pretty clear that the Nine of Swords, when you're combining Mars and Gemini, that it is like clearly energy that is like, when this kind of energy enters this kind of energy, it's something that's going to be painfully received. And because it's happening in the realm of the mind, it is something that is nightmarish and filled with like anxiety. It's like, it's fear. So I also wanted to mention from the karma cards, because this little book has been really helpful for me in terms of astrology. And it talks about, it talks about Mars a little bit, and I wanted to read to you about Mars. Mars, the angry red planet, named after the Roman god of war, was found to have a surface resembling a planet devastated by war. But the fiery, hot-headed, quick-to-act image is not the complete astrological meaning of Mars. He represents our willpower, the energy possessed by our ego, the sun, that enables us to go after, gain, and accomplish what we want. Mars is how we assert ourselves as individuals. Through Mars, we grow strong through challenge, competition, and debate. By being forced to confront the strength of our desires and dedication. Also, Mars rules the head and especially the face. He also rules weapons. So I thought that was really interesting, especially that Mars rules the head. Because when I look at Gemini, and I wanted to read to you a little bit about Gemini in here. So Gemini. And so Gemini came to rule duality in general, feeling two emotions at the same time, communication mainly by speaking and writing, basic learning, restlessness, short trips, neighbors, and relatives. The part of the body ruled by Gemini is the hands. So you see the head and the hands here. I just thought that that was really interesting. So let me now talk to you a little bit about, I'm sorry, I feel like I'm a little bit all over the map, and I hope I'm making sense to you guys. But I wanted to kind of just walk you through like where I, was piecing together the astrology, the bits from the books that made the most sense to me. And then instead of starting with this book, I kind of want to end on this book, 36 Secrets by Susan Chang, and then tell you about the spread that I created. So this card, this Decan, is the way that it's described by Susan Chang. Like it made sense to me in like the way that she pulled out like different images from the cards. So basically what she talked about was Gemini, like the Tower in Gemini, or the Lover's card and the Tower, really. Because when you look at the Lovers in the Waite Smith especially, this is the Garden of Eden, right? So it has that association with it as the Garden of Eden and the angel and the two trees. And, you know, that's your biblical reference right there. And because, because you get this, when you combine these two, you can't help but make the association that the Tower is the fall from, you know, the fall from grace, the fall from Eden. After having, you know, tasted the forbidden fruit here in the Garden of Eden. And yeah, so that's kind of where Susan Chang leads you through. And I'll just read a few of the highlights that I made. So the fall from Eden. In the Eight of Swords, we saw the moment when Adam and Eve exercised their free will. So in the Eight of Swords, choosing to eat the fruit of the tree of knowledge. In short order, the angel with the flaming sword sends them into exile. So in the 9, we see this angel minus the sword in the Lover's card. And then she goes into talking about which angel is it. So that stood out to me because angels, she says angels are messengers. The message could be one of warning, expulsion, or benediction. So the angel really stood out to me as a, you know, as a important component part at this, you know, this card. Because remember I said at the beginning, the thing about this that stands out to me, and something that Susan Chang said that stood out to me the most, is like how to deal with this card when you get it, you know, as a tarot reader, for myself and sometimes for others. Like, how do you deal with this card? And I feel like, you know, since we're in this Decan, like we have to deal with this card. And she wrote, Susan Chang wrote, that everyone needs a coping mechanism for the Nine of Swords. And we do. Everyone needs a coping mechanism for the Nine of Swords. So even when you think about it in the Thoth version of the card, so this is what she says about the Thoth version. In the Thoth version of the card, the blood-stained and sharp-edged Lord of Cruelty seems to imply a kind of ruthless behavior towards others. The Waite Smith card, by contrast, is easier to read as cruelty towards the self. Yeah, so I said that before, that this seems like cruelty towards others, and this one is cruelty towards the self. But I think it's cruelty towards the self, pretty much. She also talks about the blanket in this scene. And she also kind of hones in on this fight scene that's happening here in the corner on the, I guess it's like a nightstand or bed frame or something. That suggests this like martial energy as well that's going on here in the card. But so I didn't highlight much else because I kind of ran through that stuff already. But I guess what I'm getting at, you guys, and I hope that this video is like not too rambly and that makes some sense. I think it's just really clear what's going on when you take a look at the astrological energy. Even if you're going to like look at the tree of life and incorporate the moon in there, which might be a little bit too much for some folks, you know, that I threw that element in. But I only did just because of what I was reading from Tarot Deciphered. Anyway, like I don't think it's all that mysterious when you look at this card, that there's a sense of like despair and a sense of pain and suffering and fear and anxiety. And I felt like because we're going to be in this Decan and because we're working with this card and this energy, what I wanted us to do was to take a look at how to deal, you know, like Susan Chang said, everyone needs a coping mechanism for the Nine of Swords. And I feel like it's within these particular symbols that appear in this card and in the cards around it. So I created a spread, and you'll see down below, I'll include the PDF, the link to the PDF down below. And I'll also post a picture of it in the Boho Tarot Facebook group, which is where we are sharing in a community about the Decan Walk. I'm going to post the picture of the spread as well. But basically, the spread is for me, it's my coping mechanism for the Nine of Swords. So it's let me grab it. I just sketched it out so far, and I'll create we'll have the PDF for you. But basically, we're gonna take a look at these different particular symbols. The Tower stands for the fall, and you'll have your three Decan cards up above, like at the top. And the Tower stands for the fall. And we're gonna ask ourselves, you know, where am I punishing myself? And we're gonna look at the angel in the Gemini card. And we're gonna look here for a message from a trusted source. And then we're going to, on either side also, we're gonna take a look at the heart, the head. And we're gonna say, stop worrying over this. And the hands, start doing this. And then finally, we're going to look at this blanket, which Susan Chang and I think Emma Moline also consider this blanket the safe zone, the comfort zone. If this is the 9, right? They talk about this blanket being the kingdom, or Malkuth, the 10, Sephiroth on the tree of life. And so we're going from this, like, we can look forward to going from this state of anxiety and fear and nightmare and cruelty and despair towards the 10, towards Malkuth, towards safety, reality. Reality is another way of looking at it, going from the astral plane to the kingdom, the earth, the actual reality. So we can look at that blanket. And I mean, you know, blankets are comfort. Blankets are safe spaces. Huddled up in a blanket is definitely makes you feel safe. And so the blanket symbol is going to be part of the spread as well. I'm not going to go over the spread again because it's going to be, like I said, in that PDF link down below. So boy, this was a tough one to get through. And I feel kind of a heaviness upon me. And you know how I'm usually like light and laughing and stuff. I am a little bit, but this is not an easy card or an easy Decan, I think, to talk about. And I think the Ten of Swords is also going to be difficult. So I did it. I made it through. I'm still making videos, and I really appreciate all the feedback I've been getting from everyone that's been following along with me and leaving me comments and sharing in the Boho Tarot Facebook group. Like, I absolutely, it fills me with so much energy, like helps me helps me keep going through this in my own path and my own journey. So anyway, that was it. That was Gemini 2, Mars in Gemini, the 9 of Swords. I hope that you all enjoyed that. I hope that you all have a beautiful, wonderful Decan of Gemini 2, and that you can, like me, examine these, you know, this type of place, and when we are in this type of place, how we deal with it, how we cope with it. And yeah, I hope that the tarot is a good place, you know, for you as well, like it is for me, to help cope with, you know, pain and suffering and anxiety and fear and things like that, that so many of us experience, that all of us experience at one point or another. So, okay, that's it. Thank you so much for sticking around with me. I hope that you have a beautiful, wonderful Decan of Gemini 2 and a beautiful, wonderful day. Bye.